All right, so we've seen a lot of things we can do with the pivot table. A few other things we're going to do. We're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about pivot table, various options for display. We're going to talk about something called a slicer, which is a neat little graphical interface. And we're also going to talk about pivot charts. And we're also going to do a little bit of grouping. So let's start by let's create this thing as a pivot table again. And one of the beautiful things about a pivot table is it's very easy to create another one. We just highlight the data. Insert, pivot table, it builds us a new worksheet, and we can do whatever we like at this point. So here's what I want us to do so I can show you the grouping, or not the grouping, so I can show you the different layouts. Let's go to category and just check category. And that's one way, instead of dragging it down the row labels or throwing it over to the left, if we check it, it recognizes, hey, it's nominal data, like categorical data, so it throws it on the row label. Let's also check condition. Okay, and it throws condition, once again, that's the default, it'll throw it under the row area. So now we have that. Let's drag appraise value, or we can even check appraise value. And it automatically recognizes it as a value, a measure or dimension, okay, not a measure, a value. So it throws it in there, and I believe it throws in there as sum. Okay. Now, if we want a couple things, and I think this is nothing new for us, if we look over here, we have some options. If we want to turn off this field list, so we want that to go away, under options. For pivot table options, I can turn off the field list. So if I turn that off, okay, now I no longer have that. That was like my canvas, the thing I'm working with. I want it back. Just a toggle button. I turn it off and I turn it on. You guys have we've seen this interface. If I want to collapse things, I can use the plus minus button. Okay. Make that bigger. Okay, so I can collapse things. There is a way to turn that off as well. If I want to print it out and I don't want those plus minus buttons showing, I can turn it off over here. Okay, I can turn off the plus minus buttons. I can also turn off the field headers if I like. Okay, the field headers, you see it says row labels. Also, those can add some, those can add some difficulty or some just visually unappealing things. So I'm going to turn that back on, however. Another thing we can do is under design, under pivot table, there's something called a report layout. Okay, you guys see over here under layout, we have report layout. By default, it uses the compact form. And the compact form, what it does, for example, we have two row labels. It just indents them and puts it over. So we have sculpture and then all the categories under sculpture. We could break this out a little bit more so it'll slide that over. If we go and show it in outline form, okay, now that condition field that was just indented under category is now its own unique column. So it has a total, and then it has each sub-break, which is probably better to use a pivot table than the outline option anyways. And there's not a whole lot of difference. If we go to report layout, there's also one showing tabular form. Not a whole lot of difference there. It basically puts the total at the bottom instead of the top. Okay, that's really the big difference there. You see how that looks? We could also repeat all the, if we're going to use this as a data source for another table, which sometimes you can do that. You can build pivot tables from pivot tables. We may want every row identified with what it's showing, because right now we know this one says installation excellent, this is the value. But this one, if we just look at the row, it just says good 2500. We have to know in context that it's below installation. But if I turn on repeat all item labels, it gives me that, painting good. So now I could take that and it could become source to doing another pivot table, another summary. Does that make sense? So all these options are available out here. I'm going to turn, let's just go to compact form, back to compact form. And let's take condition and we'll throw it over here in column labels. So I can either drag it over here to column labels. I can go over here on the down arrow and say move to column labels. I'm going to do that, but we see it this way. One of the nice things, what we just did, I mean, it's called a pivot table because that's what we kind of just did. We just pivoted our view. Okay? If you guys play basketball, you guys know what a pivot is. So we just pivoted our view. We said, let's go from here to here, so show it a little bit differently. That's why it's called a pivot table. What we can also do, and I know you guys have seen this before as well, we can also filter. See these little drop downs? They also provide us that filter interface that we saw with the table. We can say, hey, we only want to see things that are in excellent and, let's say, excellent and good condition. So I click OK. You know, and now it changes the view there as well. Let's clear that. We'll just say, yeah, clear filters from condition. Now we're back to where we were. Okay, sometimes we want to sort things in our pivot table. And under pivot table tools, under options, under sort and filter, you see there's a sort option. So we can say, if we're selected on the grand total, we can say sort lowest to highest or highest to lowest. And it'll sort things for us just like we've sorted before. So that's a powerful thing. And I think I showed you this as well, but if we want to show the appraised value plus the count, let's drag down art ID below sum of appraisals. And it tells us sum of art ID, which is not what I want. So I'm going to change that value field settings to count. I think I showed you that last class. But what's really nice about this is, you know, it's interactive as well. It's not meant to be, it's nice to print it out and show someone, you know, I've done this analysis, but it's also very nice to give them this, and if they have a little bit of knowledge, they can interact with it. For example, if I want to see this, these 5 items that are excellent, that are installations, all I have to do is double click on that 5, or double click even on the amount. And when I double click, it opens up a new worksheet and says, allows me to drill down and says, hey, this is the detail. So what it's doing is it's taking out that original pivot table source and copying it over here. Okay, so it says this is the detail that goes along with those 5 items. So now I see what it makes up. And it didn't change my pivot table at all. It didn't change my original data at all. My original data looks the same. My pivot table looks the same. Okay. Now speaking of that, what a pivot table does is it's always linked to its original source. Okay, right now it's linked to its original source, but it doesn't automatically refresh. For example, if I know the installation value is really not 185,000, I could change it here, but it's really not a good idea to do. What I should do is change it in my original source. So if I go back to my original source, which is art collection, let's find an installation. Looks like row 22 has an installation. Let's change that from, I don't know, 14,000 to, let's make it a big number so it's obvious, 250,000. Now if we go back to my original pivot table, you'll see it did not update because it did not know that it should refresh. So if we go under options for pivot table options, we have to manually refresh it. And now you see it went back to that art objects table that was updated and recalculated, reconfigured all those values. Okay, so we have to refresh it. One thing I didn't show you when we originally built this pivot table is just like we have with tables, just like we had charts. If we go under design, there are a handful of pivot table styles, okay, which, just like the table, I could choose, one that fits my company's needs or my aesthetic love of orange, whatever it might be. Okay, so I can do that as well. I'm trying to think of anything else that I'd like to show you here. All right, let's move on. I'm going to show you something. Once again, this is meant to be interacted with. Okay, it's not just a stagnant piece of paper. We want it to be able to answer questions. So one way we can do that, and we can provide this tool to someone, especially if they don't understand anything about pivot tables, which is the majority of the world, we can build a little bit of an interface for them. And the interface we're going to use is something called a slicer. Okay, and it's basically a filter. So if you go under Options and go to Insert Slicer, which is a great name for anything, go to Insert Slicer, and let's do it by, let's see, what do we have on here? We have the type, and we have the condition. Let's check location. Okay, check the location box, and click OK. Okay, now what it built on here is a slicer. This little gadget, this little button thing, is a slicer. Now, if I'm on the slicer, which I am, you see I have up here Slicer Tools. Okay, just like before, we have different styles we can use for our slicer. So let's make it match. I'm going to move it. I can change the size of this. Okay, a couple different ways. I can drag it if I like, and then move it just like any other window in Office. If I click on Courtyard, okay, what it's done is now it's only showing me courtyard items. Okay, if I want to just see garden items, boom, I can click on garden items. If I want to just see South Pavilion, boom. If I want to click multiple items or select multiple items, I can hold down the Control key. Let's say I want to say the South Pavilion, the courtyard. Oops. What the heck's going on there? Uh-oh. It was laggy. Now it's doing everything I was doing. If I want to see the courtyard and the East Pavilion, okay, I can do those kind of things by holding down the Control. Other things in slicer options. Let's see. I can change the title of it over here under slicer. I could change it to, click here if I'm giving this to someone. I changed the size by dragging it. I could also change it over here in the size grouping you see up here on the right. I could change the buttons, how they're configured. If I wanted to put them in 2 columns, I could do that. 3 columns, I could change the size of them. So I have all kinds of options that I can do there. Okay. I think as I go through, I didn't follow along exactly with the book, but I believe I covered everything that was covered using slicers, sorting, removing field headers, refreshing I covered. Okay, let's do grouping. We haven't done grouping yet, so let's talk about grouping. Let's go back to our original data. Okay, and I want you to highlight everything. We're going to put in another pivot table. So highlight everything. Do Insert Pivot Table. And click OK. Okay, now this time I want to look at this stuff instead of by condition or location or category. I want to look at this stuff by date. Okay, I want to know when things came in or when I acquired this. So I'm going to take this date acquired and I'm going to drag it down to row labels. And let's look at appraised value again. So count of, let's change that to sum. So I know how much I acquired on a given day. Now what's problematic about this? If I'm trying to really see like what happened in a given time frame, what's problematic about this is it's too granular, okay, too fine. What does that mean? When data is too fine or too granular, you guys have any for MIS 102, you should know that term. Robbie, you were just in. What's too fine or granular mean?
You can't really do anything with it because there's too much detail. Yeah,
it's too much detail, right? It's too like grains of sand. It's too much. So what I want to do is I want to use a feature called grouping. I want to group it, okay? For example, let's say I want to see this by year. Okay, I don't want to see, I don't care it happened on April 18th, hey, that's my birthday, or July 11th, or July 13th. I want to know what happened each year. Well, there's an option up here. If I click on any of those dates, and I go under group selection, you see under group, and then group selection, you guys see this? I click on group selection, and let's say I want to group it by years, okay? Not months, just years. So click off of months and click on the years. I click OK, and now I have everything grouped by years. Okay, so I have in 2004 we acquired roughly $6,000 worth of items, and in 2005 we did nothing apparently, and in 2006 we acquired this many items. Now, if I do want another level of detail down, maybe I want the years and the months. Okay, if I go under group selection again, I can select both, years and months, and I click OK. Okay, so now I can see what happened in 2007 in January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, okay, which is very, very convenient, right? So instead of me changing the original data, I can group it and look at it a different way. Let's see. Now your book doesn't go through this, but grouping can also be useful for values as well. For example, let's go create another pivot table. Let's go crazy. Go into Art Collection again, and let's create another pivot table. And pivot tables are pretty resource intensive, meaning if you're running a computer that's a little old, or you have a whole bunch of pivot tables up, it could crash your computer. Like it could overwhelm the memory and say, hey, I'm out of here, right? With the blue screen of death. Your computers should be fine, but just to warn you, like we're building a lot of pivot tables, and I did have a little laggy issue, and that's probably because I had so many pivot tables open. But let's say we want to see things by, category, like we've been doing. And although we've been putting appraised value as a value, perhaps we want to see it as a row label. And then I'm going to just take art ID and just count the number of items. Okay, so what this is showing us, if you guys have what I have, we have 6 installations. We have one that's worth $2,500, one that's worth $8,000, one that's worth $25,000, one that's worth $28,000, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Once again, that data is too what, Robbie?
Granular.
Yeah, it's too fine, too granular. So what are we going to do? We're going to group it. Okay, so we grouped a date, and that was pretty easy to do because dates are, have a hierarchy to them: years, months, weeks, days. Numbers also have a hierarchy to them. So if we go click on any of those numbers, and if we go to group selection, and instead of creating individual groups, we can say, let's group by, I don't know, looks like it's going every 10,000. Let's say, well, I guess 250 is the lowest and 250,000 is the highest. So let's say we're going to group by from 250 to, and let's say every 10,000. So I click OK, let's leave it at that. And now it's showing me, it's grouped that number by range. So we have from 250 to 10,250. We have 2 items. We have one item in this range. So now we've created another way to look at the data. Okay, so grouping can be very powerful, once again, to pivot your view of the data, to change the way you are looking at it. So that was a date field. We grouped a date field, and we grouped a numeric field. Okay, let's group a category field or a nominal field, like let's say location. So I'm going to go from scratch again. So let's put in another pivot table. And let's do location on the rows. And let's do appraised value. And let's change that to sum. Well, perhaps once again this is too granular. Perhaps I don't care about the exact location, but maybe I want to know what's outside and what's inside. Okay, so I don't want to see it by courtyard and garden and East Pavilion, South Pavilion, West Pavilion. I want to know what things are outside, what things are inside. What do I have outside my museums and what do I have inside my museums? So we can group these categories. So if I take courtyard, and I'll hold down the control key, and then click on garden. Oh man, my computer got laggy. You guys were able to do it? Okay, let's see if it comes back for me. There it did. So I'm going to click on courtyard and garden. All right, try it again. Click on courtyard and garden. And I hold down my control key while I do that, right? So it selects 2 non-adjacent cells, courtyard and garden. And then under options, I want to group this selection. So I'm going to group courtyard and pavilion together, not courtyard and garden together. Okay. And you notice it created another group called Group 1. Now, Group 1 isn't very descriptive, but what I really want to call that group is I want to call that outside stuff, right? So the way I can change that is if I go click on Group 1, and in the formula bar you see it says Group 1 up there. You know the formula bar where the f of x is? Change that text, that Group 1 text, to outside. So now, instead of us having to manually go in and say, okay, things are outside, I'm going to add up courtyard and garden, hey, it's doing that for me. It's grouping those 2 things together. Now, I didn't put in the total row, but I could do that. And let's say we also want to group together, I don't know, the East and West Pavilion. Okay, the East and West Pavilion. South Pavilion's it's on its land all its own, but East and West are tight. Okay, so let's click on East Pavilion at the high level. Hit Control. Click on West Pavilion. And we should be able to group that selection. And now it's grouped those 2 things together, and we could say, I don't know, whatever, we call that group whatever we want. Okay, so that is very useful you know, when the fields themselves aren't configured exactly how we want to look at them, right? If we want to see them in a, you know, it's too fine and we want to group things together, you know, it really allows us to pivot our view of the data. Okay, questions on grouping? No excitement out there. This is great stuff, isn't it? Jeez Louise. Leah.
If you wanted to add a total row for each of them, how would you do that?
Yeah, if you go up to design, and you go to subtotals, you see in the far left, I can say, you know, show subtotals at bottom of group or top of group or whatever it might be. Okay, good question. All right, let's go back to our collection. And let's take this, let's create another pivot table. And let's do category, and we'll do appraised value. And we'll sum that. Keep it simple. Okay, now what we can also build, pivot tables are nice, you know, tabular data is very useful, but sometimes we want to go graphical with it. Well, we can tie to a pivot table, we can tie something called a pivot chart, okay, and it's a lot like the charting options we used before. So click on any cell in your pivot table so that pivot table tools is highlighted, and under options, you'll see pivot chart. So click on pivot chart, and let's just pick the two-dimensional clustered column, which is the first row. You see these are all the options we have when we did insert charts. I click OK. And what's different about a pivot chart than a traditional chart is that it is based on, it is now tied to that pivot table. If anything changes and I refresh my pivot table, this chart will automatically change. What is also